I'm Alison Kerr. I'm a journalist and the curator of an exhibition at the Glasgow Royal Concert Hall called City of Stars. And it's an exhibition of photographs from the Herald Archive of some of the great movie stars, music legends and entertainment greats who passed through Glasgow, my home city, between 1920 and 1990. So we've got people like Chuck Berry, Eartha Kitt, Cary Grant, Frank Sinatra, Bob Hope, Marlene Dietrich, you name it, they probably came to Glasgow, and we probably have some fantastic photo of them that I've managed to unearth. It all started years ago when I worked in the Herald and I did previews of the films that were on TV. I always went for the old movies, and I used to send down to the picture library for files of photos of stars who were in the movies I wanted to write about. And I found that there were actually photos at the bottom of these files of these people in Glasgow, and I couldn't believe it. People like Cary Grant, Katharine Hepburn, Gene Kelly, they all came to Glasgow, and I managed to put together quite a file of important Hollywood stars who passed through this city, doing publicity visits and questions and answers and all sorts of things, which just was kind of mind-boggling because it doesn't happen now. Glasgow was a major stop on the publicity tour back in those days. The concert hall asked me to put together an exhibition because they were looking for some new pictures to go up on the walls, and it coincided with the beginning of the Glasgow Film Festival this year, which has always got a strong retrospective. So they were doing Gene Kelly, and I pointed out that Gene Kelly had been in Glasgow in 1953 when he was sussing out locations and ideas for Brigadoon, the Scottish fantasy set in the Highlands, and that's really how the whole exhibition came about, and it seems to have attracted quite a lot of interest. People want to come and see Hollywood stars and great music stars in familiar locations that they remember from when they were younger. Well, my favourite one's probably the one that got me started on the whole thing, because when I found out that Cary Grant, who's one of my favourite Hollywood stars, had been in Glasgow, it was just kind of mind-boggling, because at the time he came here, he was the biggest star in the world. He was #1 male box office draw, and yet he still came into cities around Britain in his Rolls Royce and did these very personal public appearances where he would drive into town, he would go to a cinema, take questions from an audience and show his movie and sit amongst the audience. So my favourite picture that we've got in the exhibition is of Cary Grant shaking the hand of a little boy outside a cinema on Sauchiehall Street in 1958, and the little boy has turned out to be the editor of the Scottish Daily Express, because he's been in touch with me subsequently, and his mother and his granny are in the picture as well. One of the pictures in the exhibition is actually, I've got a personal connection to one of the people in it. It's a photograph of Irving Berlin when he came to Glasgow in 1946 for the premiere of Blue Skies, which in itself is kind of bizarre why he would come all the way to Glasgow for that. But also it has Sir Harry Lauder in it and an actress called Mary Gordon. And in fact, when you read the reports from the time, September 1946, there was no fuss made at all about the fact that the world's probably greatest living songwriter, certainly the most prolific songwriter from America, was in Glasgow. The fuss was all about the fact that Mary Gordon, who was born in Bridgeton in 1882, was coming back to Glasgow for her first visit since she went off to Hollywood and became a character actress who'd appeared in loads of films, John Ford movies, films alongside the likes of James Cagney and all the big stars of the day, James Stewart, people like that. So there was a great fuss made about that. And Mary Gordon is my great-grandmother's cousin. So I've done quite a lot of research into her life, and I was thrilled to find that there was a picture of her in such illustrious company, and she was very much the star of the evening, I believe, on that night in Glasgow. So that's another sort of personal favourite of mine. And I was thrilled to find a photo of Frank Sinatra in the archive, which we didn't know existed. Sinatra came to Glasgow in 1953. It was before he made his big comeback in From Here to Eternity. And in 1953, his career was actually a bit in the doldrums, but he still had a lot of fans from the Bobby Soxer days. So I found a photo which had been misfiled and was buried in the bottom of this particular file of Sinatra about to give a press conference in the Central Hotel in Glasgow. And the thing about this picture was the top of his head was missing. So they managed to do a bit of reconstructive work on Sinatra's head down at the Herald Archive, and they've managed to put together a really lovely shot of him, which has only been seen once. It was published at the time, very small, tiny little headshot in 1953, but now I think looks pretty impressive and is a really lovely, photo to have of him, and one which, as I say, hasn't been seen. And this is the thing, there were so many people passing through Glasgow at this period. It really was the city of stars, and you can almost imagine picture desk editors saying, oh God, here we go again, you know, this week it's Gene Kelly, because in the space of just a few months in 1953, we had Gene Kelly, we had Frank Sinatra, we had Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis. The traffic from Hollywood was just incredible. There's been a huge amount of interest in this exhibition from local people who remember the stars coming, because these are kind of iconic visits by some of these stars. The Frank Sinatra's 1990 concert at Ibrox is kind of the stuff of local legend, as is Roy Rogers and Trigger's visit when they came in 1954. There was a whole generation of schoolboys, including my father, who remember that being talked about, and some of them stood in the cold from 5:30 in the morning outside Central Station hoping to see a famous horse and singing cowboy. So there's been interest from locals, there's been interest from business people whose businesses you can see in the background of some of the pictures, and it's just been great to be able to do this. And also people are interested in vintage and retro and all this kind of stuff, so people of my generation are getting the chance to see stars that they have only otherwise seen on screen or photographed in London or, you know, more glamorous places. They're getting to see them in our own backyard, and in places where you're not going to see Brad Pitt, you're not going to see Johnny Depp, you know, you're not going to see the big stars of today. They're not going to roll into town and just, you know, wander about the way that these people did. So I think that's all part of the appeal.